Hi, and welcome back to Stories by Tui. Today we're going to be reviewing Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, and it's a memoir by the founder and creator of Nike. And let me just start by saying it's a great book, and it's a business book in a sense, but it reads almost like a novel because Phil is very vulnerable and raw, and he tells us as it is his journey, his life, business, relationships, all of it. And the name Shoe Dog, you'll find it as you read, but basically it's this group of people that are obsessed with shoes. And throughout the book, you get to appreciate and immerse yourself in a world of shoes and the designing of shoes and the thought that goes into it. And if you're, for example, not quite like a sportsman like myself or a sportswoman, and you've not really gotten into this world of shoes and what it takes to have a good running shoe, this will take you there. And so it's very interesting to see people who are obsessed and they are taken by their art, by their craft, and they pour themselves into it. And this is the story of shoe dogs, from around the world, mostly Japan, US. We get to interact through this book with people who are obsessed, and it's inspiring in that way that whatever your craft is, it is important and inspiring to pour yourself into it. And I think that will start the first lesson, because I just really want to draw lessons in life and business from this book. And one of the lessons was that Phil mentions at some point that people are drawn to effort. Human beings are drawn to effort. And I think that's why consistency works so well, because when human beings see you pouring yourself in and pushing, and we have one such athlete who you get so connected to in the story, who puts in his all. It almost reminded me of what's his name, this basketballer who is a legend, I think Michael B. Jordan, and just how he wouldn't settle for less. And I remember listening to his documentary, the series, and he was like, every single time, in every single game, I bring my A game, because there might be someone who's interacting with me for the first time, and they've got to know that I am who I am. Like, I am this amazing athlete, and it's the same thing. And so you see people who were obsessed with shoes, like properly obsessed. They would dismantle shoes, like one of his founders or co-partner in the formation of Nike, before it was even called Nike. And he was a coach, I think Bowerman, and he would dismantle shoes, just try and understand, reconstruct. It's amazing to see. So you get immersed into a world of people who are obsessed with their craft, obsessed with shoes and running and sports and all of that. So that clicks something in you. It just sort of makes you not want to become mediocre. Yeah, so that's first things first. But really, Shoe Dog is a story of a crazy idea. And Phil had this idea while he was in Stanford doing his master's, and he presented it as a project. But for him, it wasn't just a school assignment, because after he believed in this thing so much and he loved running, but he couldn't be a professional runner. He wasn't that good, but he was like, I still have to be in this space somehow. And so he had this crazy idea of making shoes, of selling Japanese shoes. And his father supported him financially because he wanted to travel to Japan after school and around the world, just so that he can see the best way he can bring this idea to life. And at this point, my friend brought to attention the privilege in this, and I acknowledge it. But I also recognize that what Phil did with his privilege is very commendable. And a lot of people have privilege, but they never really quite make the most out of it. So as much as he had privilege, he also like really leveraged on it. And so it started with a crazy idea, and that's the second lesson I guess, for today is that sometimes in life there's this thread that pulls at you or calls you, and you feel like you need to follow it, but you don't have the bigger picture. And this book sort of lets you know that you don't have to know what's next. And sometimes that's what life is about, just the next step. You don't have to have the bigger picture. I don't think Phil ever imagined that Nike would become what it is today. And especially if you're a believer, it's like you just try and then trust God. And it's better to have tried and poured yourself in the trying and failed than never to have done it at all. And so this guy went all in. I mean, at some point, yes, he did have a job, a 9 to 5, just to try and make ends meet. But eventually he was like, I'm all in, like, I want to make this work. And he followed this thread and it unraveled. And we essentially see his life's work. So literally, we see Phil as like he's just leaving school, and then he's traveling around the world, and then he's dating, he gets heartbroken, we see him getting jobs, and then he gets married and has kids up until the point where he is retiring. And literally we see his life's work. And so life is so short, and it's like with this, like Mary Oliver says, with this one wild life, what will you do? And we may not all be like Phil, who has this one thing that you're obsessed over, but could be you're neurodivergent and you have so many interests and you're multi-passionate, and it's like you could tackle these things one at a time. But as you do this one thing, it's like you're pouring yourself into it, because life is short. And one day you'll just be looking back and it's like, it'll be like, what did I do with my one wild life? So yeah, sometimes follow that thread. You never know where it leads. If it's a dead end, it's cool. Reinvent yourself, pivot, whatever. But I think just seeing him following this thread and hanging on to it and fighting for it over and over again was really interesting. And there was an interview where he mentioned that, because in the book there's many points where this thing was failing, like it was dying. It was bankruptcy, there was competition, fierce competition, cutthroat, but he kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And he mentions in this interview that even if it failed, he would have built it again. So this thing that pulls at you, you alone knows, and you alone understands. For some people it pulls at you heavily, for some it's just hints. Follow it and try, you never know. Right? So that was lesson number 2. Follow the thread and watch your life's purpose unravel. And then number 3 is that as you follow it and you're true to yourself, you will attract your tribe. So literally in the book, we see the most eccentric group of people come together, and the core team, the founders of Nike, they are crazy. Like, he would describe some of these people, you're like, well, you're weird and you're weird, but then they came together and they were geniuses, and everyone had their own form of genius. And I remember listening to something the other day about how we have different types of intelligence, and someone else has intelligence in another area that you never could have. But when you bring these people together, it's something amazing. And the thing about Nike, it's so clear, and even in Phil's writing, he doesn't even take credit. He's like, I am because we are. You know, this whole Ubuntu thing, that there's something that every single team member brought that Phil could never, you know, and he let them be creative. He allowed for creative freedom. There was no like hierarchy, you know, I'm the boss. No, like these guys could tell Phil when he was messing up and screwing up, and they'd be like, straight up, what you're saying right now makes 0 sense and it's absolutely nonsense. And they were just this bunch of riffraffs, but they were expressing themselves and they were obsessed with shoes, and they just made this crazy dream happen. And so when you're authentic, and the people that are supposed to be, maybe some people call it your destiny helpers or something, they come into your life, remember they also have their own destinies. And so you don't control, you let them. I feel like maybe I will also do a book review soon of Let Them theory, because you can clearly tell it is in me. But yeah, you allow people to have the creative freedom and to just be themselves, and in that way you all end up flourishing. So yeah, when you're authentic, you attract your tribe. But when they do come, don't try to stifle, don't try to control, let them be who they're supposed to be. And then the third thing, I think we're in the fourth, is that it's one of the most powerful things I found in the book, when he talks about this whole Nike thing not being just business. It was not just about selling and buying of shoes. It was not transactional. It was deeper than that. And that it was livelihoods, it was passion, it was sportsmanship, it was, and you can tell, because we go into it like hands are dirty, we're into it with them from a distance though. And you can tell this is not just about business, and I know capitalism has a lot of wrongs and ills that have come out of it, working conditions and quality of life. But I also can't help but agree with his point of view. And I feel like after reading this book, my view of businesses shifted a little bit. Because, for example, we were having lunch with my friend the other day, and she was telling me how there are times when she's in a slump and she goes on to these apps that help you shop for things, order things, and at that moment it was exactly what she needed. When sometimes people are in such slumps and you're so low, and this thing that maybe the owners or the people working, they just view this as a 9 to 5 that's going to pay my bills, but for someone this is literally making them do the basic things that they wouldn't have been able to do. And so is it really just a business? And when I'm catching up with friends, maybe in a restaurant, and maybe to the owner this is like, okay, how do we keep this business afloat? But in that moment I am catching up with a friend that I haven't maybe seen in many years, and we're building community in that sense, and we're keeping in touch. And it's because one of the things that enables it is that environment that's been created. And it's like, is it just a business? And so even looking at Nike, for example, one of the core, okay, let me call them team members, called Woodell, was paralyzed. And when the parents asked Phil if, not even parents, it was one of the co-founders, called Coach Boerman, reached out and was like, you need to hire this guy. And he hired him, and at first he was skeptical because he was in a wheelchair and he wasn't sure how he would handle working in this business that was just starting up, and things were all over the place. But he ended up being one of the most valuable team members, and in a sense got his purpose. And so you ask yourself, is it just business? And you don't even know the ripple effects. Yes, there's so many things that can happen that are very negative, but there's also so much good. And it's so just an encouragement to people building businesses, is that pour into it, because you're pouring into someone else's life, and you might not know it, you might not even be here to see it, but it's doing that. Like YouTube, for example, the fact that a lot of us, if you use it the right way, and social media, you get built up in ways that in your circle of the people around you would never have gotten such exposure. And so again, is it just business? So that was really an eye-opener to the things that we can build if we are intentional. and appreciating the work that people are doing out here that makes life better, inspires, exposes, and all of that good stuff. So for me, that was quite powerful when Phil talked about it the way he did. And the last one is on relationships. And the unfortunate thing is that because of his obsessive nature and risk-taking nature, and a lot of the times when they were building, a lot was at stake, his family life sort of suffered, and especially his relationship with one of his sons. I think he was the eldest son, and they never really quite had a good relationship until eventually the son tragically died. And it brings to light what's important at the end of the day, and when is enough, right? What point do you stop pushing? And it's slowly being established that there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's there, but people prefer now to say harmony. And so being intentional about the harmonies that you need to create in your life is so key. And I remember one of my siblings likes this song that's been on TikTok a lot. If the world was ending, I want to be next to you. Pardon the voice. But I thought about that line. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's like, if indeed the world was ending, where would I rather be and with whom? And it was very clear to me. And then the next question was, am I pouring into those relationships the way I ought to? And the answer is not quite. And so this book really, this is life. Like, it was his life. Like, there's no turning back. Like, the decisions made were made, mistakes that happened. And the beautiful thing about books and hearing people's stories is that you don't have to make the same mistakes. So for all the good and the beautiful things that they did at Nike, and also the things that were like, what on earth, he let slip maybe an aspect that's maybe possibly the most important. I don't know. So yeah, it's one of those things to think about and to establish how to go about those relationships that are key. So yeah, very amazing book, insightful, raw, like I said, and I would 100% recommend that you read it. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Let me know if you read it, what stood out for you, and yeah, let's see. Thank you and goodbye.